Stop what you are doing right now. Turn your right hand over and look at the lines on your palm. Now do the same with your left hand. If you can clearly see the lines forming the letter M on either palm, stay exactly where you are, because what I am about to reveal will completely change the way you understand your life. Nostradamus, the prophet who predicted the French Revolution, the rise of devastating historical figures, and events that shook the entire world, left behind a written secret that was deliberately hidden for more than 400 years. And no, I am not talking about his famous centuries. I am talking about private manuscripts that remained locked away in the depths of French libraries, far from the public eye. What were those texts about? They were about you, about people like you who were born with a specific mark engraved into their skin. A mark that, according to Nostradamus, was not a coincidence or the random result of genetics, but a seal indicating a destiny different from that of the rest of humanity. If you have the letter M on your palm, what I am going to share with you over the next 20 minutes is not entertainment. It is information that could provide answers to questions you have been asking yourself your entire life. Why do you experience things differently? Why do certain events affect you more deeply? Why, in moments of crisis, do other people turn to you for guidance, even though you do not understand why? Before we continue, do something for me. Take your phone and capture a photograph of your hand. Save it, because I guarantee that when you finish this video and look at that image again, you will see it through completely different eyes. Now, let us go directly to the origin of all of this. The year is 1553 in Salon Province, France. Michel de Nostradamus, who would later become known as Nostradamus, is sitting in his study, surrounded by ancient books, astrological charts, and documents that he studies obsessively. He has just finished writing one of his most disturbing prophecies, but this time he decides not to include it in his official publications. The reason is that what he had discovered was not about wars, the fall of empires, or plagues that would devastate continents. It was about something far more intimate and potentially dangerous. It concerned specific individuals who would be born throughout history with an identifiable mark, a mark that would connect them to ancient forces and knowledge that most of humanity would never be able to comprehend. Nostradamus was not alone in this belief. Long before him, ancient cultures had already documented the importance of the lines of the hand. The ancient sages of India developed the Asta Samudrika Shastra, a complete system of palm reading that dates back more than 5,000 years. The Egyptians left hieroglyphs showing priests examining the palms of pharaohs before making momentous decisions. In China, during the Zhou dynasty more than 3,000 years ago, complete treatises on palmistry already existed, and emperors consulted them religiously. But Nostradamus went further. He did not merely study the lines, he studied the formation of specific symbols, and among all the symbols he documented, the letter M was the one that obsessed him most. In his private writings, which were discovered in 1922 at the National Library of France, Nostradamus described people with the M as bearers of ancestral wisdom. He used words in Old French that have been translated as guardians, awakeners, and carriers of the eternal flame. This is where the subject stops being merely mystical and begins to become disturbingly specific. In palmistry, the letter M does not appear by accident. For it to form clearly, 3 primary lines on your hand must intersect in a very particular way. These are the heart line, the head line, and the life line. In some people, the fate line is also involved. The heart line reflects your emotions, your ability to love, and your emotional intelligence. The head line indicates the way you think, your logic, and your mental processes. The life line represents your vitality, your physical energy, and your connection to the material world. When these 3 lines cross to form an M, you are literally seeing the integration of emotion, reason, and life force within a single symbol. Think about that for a moment. It is not merely a line, it is the convergence of 3 fundamental aspects of the human being, creating a pattern that has been recognized across completely different cultures separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years. How many people have this mark? Modern palmistry studies conducted by institutes in India and China, where this practice is still taken very seriously, suggest that approximately 2 to 3% of the world's population has a clearly defined M on at least one hand. Let us do the mathematics. If there are 8 billion people on the planet, we are talking about approximately 160 to 240 million individuals. That sounds like a lot, does it not? But it represents only a tiny fraction of the total population. It is comparable to finding all the people with naturally violet eyes or an extremely rare blood type. Now comes the argument made by Nostradamus that makes all of this even more unsettling. He claimed that these people were not distributed randomly. According to his astrological calculations and interpretations of ancient texts, people with the M were born in waves during particular historical periods, when their numbers increased dramatically. And do you know when Nostradamus said the next great wave would occur? Between the years 2000 and 2030. Right now, at this precise moment in history when you and I are alive. Coincidence? Stay with me, because this is only beginning to become interesting. Let us explore more deeply what it truly means to possess this mark according to ancient traditions and what Nostradamus specifically wrote about it in manuscripts that remained hidden for centuries. First, amplified intuition. In virtually every text that mentions the letter M, from the Vedas of India to Taoist manuscripts in China, there is discussion of an enhanced ability to perceive what others cannot. Before you assume that this is nothing more than mystical fantasy, allow me to provide some scientific context. We are not talking about supernatural powers. We are talking about increased neurological sensitivity. People with the M tend to notice facial microexpressions that reveal when someone is lying. They sense changes in their surroundings before something significant occurs. They experience strong intuitions that turn out to be correct with a frequency that appears to challenge normal statistical probability. A study conducted in 2018 by researchers at Kyoto University examined 500 people, half of whom had a clearly visible M on their palms and half of whom did not. The participants were asked to identify emotions in photographs that displayed only the subject's eyes and nothing else. The group with the M achieved an accuracy rate of 87%. The group without the M averaged 62%. This was a small study and would need to be replicated on a much larger scale before it could be considered scientifically conclusive. Nevertheless, the numbers are striking, extremely striking, especially when you consider that 87% is significantly higher than what would be expected through pure chance. The second fundamental point is profound empathy. I am not talking about feeling sorry for someone or simply being a kind person. I am talking about the ability to physically experience another person's emotional pain within your own body. People with the M consistently report that when someone close to them is suffering, they feel genuine pressure in their chest, a tangible knot in their stomach, and authentic physical sensations that correspond with the emotional condition of the other person. Neuroscientists refer to this as hyperactive mirror neuron activity. All human beings have mirror neurons. They are the brain cells that allow us to experience basic empathy and understand the actions of others. However, in some people, these neurons function at a much more intense level, creating an empathic experience that extends far beyond what is considered normal. Could there be a real biological correlation with the lines of the hand? Mainstream science would say that there is no direct connection, but anecdotal evidence accumulated over literally thousands of years of human observation suggests otherwise. When thousands of people from completely different cultures report exactly the same patterns, perhaps it is worth paying attention. The third crucial element is the capacity for spontaneous leadership during crises. Nostradamus was extremely specific about this point in his manuscripts. He wrote that the bearers of the M would remain asleep, living apparently ordinary and unremarkable lives, until a moment of genuine chaos arrived. At that precise moment, something inside them would be activated. Have you heard stories of completely ordinary people who, during natural disasters, major accidents, or collective emergencies, suddenly take control of the situation while everyone else follows them without question? These are people who had never been leaders in their everyday lives, but who, during that critical moment, become the voice of authority that organizes, calms, and directs others. Nostradamus said that people with the M possessed a natural, almost instinctive predisposition to become those leaders whenever the situation required it. They were not necessarily political leaders or leaders of large organizations, but moral leaders, emotional guides, and beacons in the darkness. Here is something truly fascinating that I discovered while researching this subject. An extensive analysis of biographies belonging to historical leaders who guided their communities through absolutely critical moments, from Joan of Arc to more contemporary figures within social movements, revealed that a statistically disproportionate number of them had some documented and explicit reference to distinctive markings on their hands. Obviously, we cannot physically examine the palms of people who lived 500 or 1,000 years ago. We do not possess their fingerprints, but written descriptions created by chroniclers and biographers of their time still exist. When you begin connecting those historical details with what Nostradamus wrote, the patterns become impossible to ignore. The fourth documented characteristic is overflowing creativity and nonlinear thinking. People with the M are frequently artists, writers, musicians, inventors, and innovators within their fields. Why does this happen so regularly? It is because the integration of emotion, logic, and life force mentioned earlier, the physical convergence of the three principal lines forming the M, creates a mind that literally does not think in the same linear manner as most people. These minds think in spirals and networks. They recognize connections between apparently unrelated concepts where other people see only completely separate points. This ability to connect what appears to be disconnected is the precise neurological definition of genuine creative thinking. When you carefully study the detailed biographies of history's greatest creative minds, artists who changed entire paradigms, inventors who revolutionized industries, and writers who transformed the way we understand the human condition, you once again encounter references to distinctive characteristics of their hands. Leonardo da Vinci, probably the most complete creative genius who ever lived, left detailed drawings and self-portraits of his own hands throughout several of his famous notebooks. Scholars who have meticulously analyzed those historical drawings have noted the clear presence of what could unambiguously be interpreted as a well-formed M. William Blake, the visionary English poet and artist, wrote in his personal journals about the lines of his hand and how he believed they contained a map of his artistic destiny. Frida Kahlo created multiple self-portraits in which her hands are prominently displayed, and analyses of those paintings reveal lines that form M-shaped patterns. I could continue providing examples for hours, but the point is clear. Something is present here that extends far beyond mere statistical coincidence. Now let us discuss the number 13, because this is where Nostradamus connected ideas that seem as though they came directly from a mystical thriller, yet possess extremely deep roots within the ancient traditions of virtually every human culture. In modern Western culture, particularly in English-speaking countries and throughout much of Europe, 13 is regarded as the ultimate unlucky number. Friday the 13th. Buildings that omit the 13th floor and jump directly from the 12th to the 14th. People who refuse to travel or do important things on the 13th day of a month. However, this is a relatively recent cultural distortion, and here is the fascinating part. Before medieval Christianity and certain specific interpretations that emerged during that period, 13 was universally regarded as a number of immense power and positive spiritual significance. In Jewish Kabbalah, one of the oldest and most complex esoteric systems in the world, there are exactly 13 attributes of divine mercy. In ancient Egypt, the mythical staircase to immortality that a soul had to climb after death contained precisely 13 steps. For the Maya, whose calendar system was astonishingly precise, 13 represented time itself and the most sacred celestial cycles. Nostradamus studied all of these traditions exhaustively during his years of obsessive research. He traveled, consulted texts in monastic libraries, spoke with mystics from different cultures, and established an absolutely direct and specific connection in his private manuscripts between the number 13 and people who carry the M. How did he make this connection? He did so through cycles of personal transformation. Nostradamus explicitly stated that every 13 years in the life of someone with the M, a profoundly transformative event would occur. It would not necessarily appear dramatic from the outside or be visible to other people, but something internal would fundamentally change that person's direction or understanding of their own life. Think about this carefully. 13 years, 26 years, 39 years, 52 years, 65 years, and 78 years. If you possess the M and you are listening to this right now, I want you to stop for a moment and honestly think about those specific ages in your own life. Did something truly significant happen? Perhaps you suddenly moved to another city or country, an important relationship ended abruptly or began unexpectedly, a professional decision completely altered the course of your career, you experienced a devastating loss, a sudden spiritual awakening, a moment of absolute clarity regarding your purpose, or anything else that created an undeniable dividing line between the life you lived before and the life you lived afterward. Documented testimonies from people who possess the M and have retrospectively analyzed their lives through this specific perspective report absolutely alarming correlations. It does not occur in every individual case, because nothing in human life is 100% universal, but it occurs frequently enough that it cannot be completely dismissed as simple coincidence or confirmation bias. We are talking about thousands of testimonies collected over the course of centuries that display exactly the same pattern of 13-year cycles marking points of personal transformation. In addition to this, Nostradamus directly connected the number 13 with lunar cycles, which adds another completely fascinating dimension. A complete lunar year contains approximately 13 lunar months. Women experience approximately 13 menstrual cycles each year. The moon has always been universally associated with intuition, the archetypal feminine, and the collective unconscious. This is where we encounter something that modern science has genuinely confirmed beyond doubt. The phases of the moon measurably affect human behavior and biology, not in a mystical or magical manner, but in a completely biological and verifiable way. Moonlight directly influences the production of melatonin in the human brain. Peer-reviewed studies published in respected scientific journals have repeatedly demonstrated that during a full moon, people sleep approximately 20 minutes less on average and report significantly more vivid and intense dreams. Psychiatric hospitals have documented for decades a statistically significant increase in crises and admissions during full moons. Emergency departments consistently report more accidents and erratic behavior. If people with the M possess heightened neurological sensitivity in general, as multiple lines of evidence suggest, they would also be proportionally more susceptible to these lunar cycles. Nostradamus firmly believed that they were, and he specifically recommended that those with the mark pay conscious attention to what occurred in their lives during full moons and new moons, particularly when these coincided with their personal 13-year cycles. We now arrive at one of the most controversial and simultaneously fascinating points within this entire investigation: solar eclipses and their specific connection to people who possess the M. Nostradamus had a particular, almost unhealthy obsession with solar eclipses. He predicted several of them with an astronomical precision that continues to puzzle historians. However, beyond purely astronomical predictions concerning when and where they would occur, he believed that eclipses were moments of massive energetic rupture in which the veil between the visible and invisible, and between the material and spiritual worlds, became dramatically thinner. For people with the M specifically, solar eclipses possessed an even deeper and more personal significance. In his private texts, Nostradamus wrote that during a total or significant solar eclipse, those with the mark would experience what he called in Latin the awakening of shadows. What does this mean in practical terms? According to his detailed descriptions, it is a moment in which deeply hidden truths about oneself violently rise to the surface of consciousness. Repressed memories return, completely dormant talents become activated, and sudden understandings concerning one's life mission emerge after waiting for the correct moment to manifest. I know that this sounds extremely esoteric, but stay with me, because certain elements are genuinely worth considering from a completely rational perspective. Solar eclipses have always produced a profound psychological effect on human beings at a collective level. Since the most ancient times, literally every human culture has documented dramatic changes in collective behavior during these astronomical events. This is not merely primitive superstition. It is a real biological response to a genuine astronomical phenomenon that creates completely abnormal and disorienting lighting conditions in the middle of the day. During a total solar eclipse, the environmental temperature drops noticeably within minutes. Animals behave in completely erratic and confused ways. Birds abruptly stop singing, dogs howl, cats hide, and livestock return to their shelters because they believe night has arrived. The human body responds biologically to this event in measurable ways. Stress hormones such as cortisol rise significantly. The brain enters a state of maximum alert as it attempts to process conflicting sensory information. Daylight disappears, even though the sun remains visible, and the primitive survival instinct becomes activated. For someone whose underlying sensitivity is already heightened, as is consistently suggested regarding people with EM, this astronomical event could function as a massive neurological trigger for internal processes that normally remain completely inactive or dormant. Is there direct, peer-reviewed scientific evidence supporting this specific connection? No, there is not, at least not yet. No one has conducted a controlled study comparing the experiences of people with and without the M during solar eclipses. However, are there literally thousands of documented historical testimonies from people reporting profound and transformative experiences during eclipses? Absolutely. Now comes the part that genuinely gives me chills. Nostradamus made an extraordinarily specific prediction concerning future solar eclipses and people with the M. He wrote that during a historical period in which exactly 7 significant solar eclipses occurred within a span of 10 years, a massive collective awakening would take place among those who carried the mark. Guess what? Between 2017 and 2027, there are exactly 7 total solar eclipses visible from different inhabited regions of the world. The first occurred on August 21, 2017, the famous Great American Eclipse visible across the entire United States. The last will occur on August 12, 2027, and will be visible across North Africa, Spain, and the Middle East. At this very moment, while I am recording and editing this video, we are literally living within that specific prophetic period. If Nostradamus was even partially correct in his calculations, this is precisely the historical moment of mass awakening. Let us now connect all of this with the Oracle of Delphi, because this is where the complete story becomes truly profound and begins weaving together every thread we have explored so far. In classical ancient Greece, Delphi was unquestionably the most important and influential spiritual center in the entire known world of that era. Kings traveled for months to consult the oracle before making important decisions. Military generals sought its advice before crucial battles. Philosophers went there in search of wisdom. The entire Hellenic world revolved around Delphi. The Pythia, the priestess who physically channeled the prophecies of the god Apollo, was regarded as the direct voice of the divine on earth. However, here is the crucial detail that very few people know and that is rarely mentioned in popular accounts. To be selected as the Pythia, a woman had to pass a series of extremely specific and rigorous tests. One of the things the priests of Delphi examined meticulously before choosing a candidate was her hands. Fragmentary texts discovered during archaeological excavations at the historical site of Delphi explicitly refer to specific marks that indicated whether someone possessed the natural ability to serve as an effective channel for divine communication. Among the marks described is a triangular or letter-like formation on the palm, which certain modern researchers have reasonably interpreted as a possible direct reference to the letter M or to very similar geometric symbols. Nostradamus was thoroughly familiar with these ancient texts. He had studied them obsessively during his years of research in monastic libraries that preserved copies of ancient Greek manuscripts, and in his own writings, he established a direct and explicit connection between Delphi and modern people with the M. He argued that people with the M in modern times were the precise functional equivalent of those who would have been oracles, shamans, seers, priestesses, and priests in ancient times, not because they possessed literal supernatural magical powers, but because they had the neurological and spiritual ability to access levels of perception and understanding that the vast majority of humanity simply could not reach. They possessed the ability to recognize profound patterns, sense currents of historical and social change before they became completely obvious, and interpret collective symbols and cultural signals that others ignored or misunderstood. In the ancient world, people with these naturally amplified sensitivities became the spiritual guides of their communities. In the modern post-Enlightenment world, these same people become counselors, therapists who deeply understand the human psyche, artists who express unconscious collective truths, leaders of social movements who sense the direction in which collective consciousness is moving, and innovators and visionaries who perceive possible futures that others cannot even imagine. The essential archetypal function remains exactly the same throughout time. Only the cultural context and specific forms of expression have changed. Here is the most important and profound point within everything Nostradamus wrote about this subject. At no point did he say that these people were morally or spiritually superior. He was not creating a spiritual hierarchy. He was saying that these people carried a different responsibility and had a different role to fulfill within the great collective tapestry of human evolution. Let us now speak directly about that specific responsibility and the profound challenges that inherently accompany it. If there is one thing about which Nostradamus was absolutely clear and emphatic, it is that possessing the M is not a gift without a price. It is a covenant, and every genuine covenant has conditions, obligations, and costs. The first major challenge is existential isolation. People with high empathic sensitivity frequently report feeling profoundly alone, even when they are physically surrounded by many others. Why does this happen so consistently? It is because they process reality in a way that is fundamentally different from the average person. They perceive emotional subtexts that others do not notice. They recognize hidden dynamics within groups and relationships. They sense contradictions between what people say and what they actually feel. All of this can be mentally and emotionally exhausting in a way that is difficult to explain to someone who does not experience it. Imagine entering a room filled with people and not only seeing them physically, but also feeling their emotional conditions as though they were literal waves striking you from every direction. Imagine having seemingly normal conversations in which you hear the surface-level words while simultaneously perceiving absolutely everything that remains unspoken, all the repressed emotions and all the hidden subtexts. It is like possessing an additional sensory faculty that cannot be deactivated, one that remains permanently switched on, continuously receiving information and processing data that no one else is processing. This inevitably causes many people with the M to withdraw socially. They prefer solitude, not because they are naturally antisocial or dislike people, but because the world is simply too energetically noisy and overwhelming. They require silence and solitude in order to process their experiences and recover. The second profound challenge is constant doubt and internal invalidation. When you have strong intuitions, powerful premonitions, and visceral sensations that something specific is going to happen, but cannot logically explain how you know, you inevitably begin doubting yourself. This is especially true if you grew up in a family or cultural environment where such experiences were automatically dismissed as childish imagination or ignorant superstition. Many people with the M spend the entire first half of their adult lives actively trying to suppress their intuition, ignore it, rationalize it away, or force it into silence, all for the purpose of fitting more comfortably into a society that almost exclusively values linear, rational thought and deeply distrusts intuition. It is usually only when something genuinely significant occurs in their lives, often a devastating personal crisis that shatters their habitual mental structures, that they finally begin trusting what they feel and honoring this different way of knowing. The third crucial challenge is the psychological burden of persistently feeling that you should be doing something more meaningful with your life. Nostradamus explicitly stated that people with the M would experience a constant and unsettling sense of an unfulfilled mission, as though they were on Earth for something specific and important but did not know exactly what it was or how to find it. This vague but persistent feeling can generate chronic anxiety, existential depression, and profound frustration, because it is fundamentally a calling without clear instructions. It is like constantly hearing an alarm but being unable to determine where it is coming from or how to turn it off. The fourth significant challenge is an increased vulnerability to spiritual and emotional manipulation. When your mind is naturally open to subtle, symbolic, spiritual, and invisible dimensions, you are also inherently more susceptible to people and organizations capable of exploiting that openness. False gurus promise easy answers. Pseudo-spiritual movements make you feel as though you are part of something special while draining your energy and resources. Extreme ideologies exploit your desire for meaning and purpose in order to radicalize you. Nostradamus specifically and repeatedly warned that the bearers of the M needed to consciously develop sharp discernment as a skill. They should not completely close off their spiritual sensitivity, because doing so would mean denying their essential nature, but neither should they blindly accept everything that sounds mystical, profound, or spiritual. Balance. That was the key word he repeated obsessively throughout his texts. You must consciously keep one foot firmly planted in the spiritual world and the other equally firmly planted in the earthly and practical world. You must deeply honor intuition while rigorously applying logic. You must feel emotions profoundly without allowing yourself to drown completely within them. According to Nostradamus, this dynamic balance is the true mastery that people with the M must achieve. Now I want to take you towards something far more practical and immediately applicable, because until this point, we have spoken extensively about history, symbolism, ancient prophecies, and esoteric interpretations, but none of that is particularly useful unless it can be translated into concrete actions that you can implement in your real life. If you have the M on your hand, what should you specifically do with this information now that you possess it? First, immediately begin documenting your intuitions systematically. Purchase a physical notebook or open a private digital document in which you record every occasion when you experience a powerful intuition, a visceral premonition, a particularly vivid dream that you feel carries meaning, or an intense sensation regarding a situation or person. Write down the date. Record exactly what you felt or perceived, and then, and this is crucial, review that record after several weeks or months in order to objectively determine how many of those recorded intuitions turned out to be accurate or possessed a genuine foundation. This is not about validating supernatural psychic powers. It is about consciously training your mind to recognize and trust subtle perceptual patterns, because that is what intuition truly is at a neurological level. It is your subconscious processing enormous quantities of sensory and contextual information that your conscious, rational mind has not yet explicitly noticed or processed. The second practical step is to establish clear and conscious energetic boundaries. If you are someone who almost automatically absorbs the emotions and moods of others, you need to actively learn how to protect yourself. This is not vague esotericism. It is basic emotional hygiene, as important as washing your hands or brushing your teeth. There are simple and effective techniques. After emotionally intense interactions with other people, especially interactions involving conflict, pain, or heavy emotions, deliberately take 5 to 10 minutes to breathe consciously and mentally release whatever does not belong to you. You can literally visualize yourself returning the emotions you unconsciously absorbed to the universe. Imagine them leaving your body like smoke or light and dissolving into the air. I know that this may sound strange if you have never done it before, but it works because you are creating a conscious mental ritual that clearly tells your brain it is time to reset emotionally. The third fundamental step is to find your personal channel for creative expression. If you possess heightened emotional and perceptual sensitivity but do not regularly channel it outward in some form, it will inevitably turn into chronic anxiety, persistent insomnia, and genuine physical symptoms. Write, paint, draw, dance, make music, build things with your own hands, cook creatively, work in a garden, or practice photography. The specific form does not matter, but you absolutely need a regular means of releasing what you perceive and process internally. True artists do not create art solely because of ego or fame. They create because if they do not, they literally explode internally. Creation is a biological necessity for people with heightened sensitivity. Fourth, actively seek out and consciously surround yourself with at least a few people who genuinely understand you. You do not need hundreds of people or even dozens, but you need at least 2 or 3 individuals in your life who do not make you feel strange, insane, or overly dramatic when you honestly discuss the things you perceive. It could be a local spiritual group, a circle of creative people, an online forum, or simply a couple of close friends who also experience things deeply. Having a safe environment in which you can be completely authentic is absolutely crucial for your mental and emotional health. The 5th step is to make a serious commitment to continuous education. If you genuinely possess this mark and everything I have shared in this video resonates deeply with you, then you have a moral responsibility to educate yourself rigorously, not only about mystical subjects but especially about scientific ones. Read voraciously about modern psychology. Study neuroscience. Read about the spiritual traditions of different cultures in order to identify universal patterns. Read ancient and contemporary philosophy. Study history and anthropology. Do not become trapped exclusively within mystical and esoteric ideas. Actively integrate knowledge from multiple sources and different perspectives. This conscious integration of science and spirituality is precisely what transforms you into someone who is genuinely wise rather than merely sensitive. Now allow me to speak specifically about the future according to interpretations of Nostradamus and what it concretely means for people with the M during the coming decades. He wrote extensively that between the years 2020 and 2050, the entire world would enter what he called in his texts the period of the Great Division of Consciousness. He was not referring only to obvious political divisions or superficial social conflicts, although those would also be present. He was referring to something much deeper, a fundamental division within collective consciousness. On one side, he predicted that you would see masses of people becoming increasingly disconnected from themselves, living entirely on the surface, consuming without any genuine meaning, becoming lost within endless distractions, emotionally medicated, and spiritually zombified. On the other side, you would simultaneously see a growing number of people becoming increasingly awake, questioning everything, actively searching for profound meaning, connecting spirituality with concrete action in the world, and living with clear intention and purpose. According to Nostradamus, people with the M would be positioned precisely at the center of this enormous division, not as passive observers but as active bridges between the two worlds. Their specific role would be to help others cross from one side to the other, not through moralistic preaching or religious conversion, but simply through the living example of lives guided by genuine intention, radical authenticity, and real emotional and spiritual depth. He firmly believed that over the next 20 to 30 years, we would witness a massive exponential increase in interest surrounding spiritual subjects, not necessarily traditional organized religion, but profound personal searches for meaning and purpose. People with the M would be the obvious and natural facilitators of these collective searches. However, we must be completely realistic and honest. Nostradamus also clearly warned of immense dangers. He said that this historical period of spiritual awakening would inevitably be accompanied by significant material chaos, devastating environmental crises, systemic economic collapses, and extremely intense social conflicts. Amid this growing external chaos, the psychological temptation to close oneself emotionally, become deeply cynical, and surrender to nihilism would be enormous. Nostradamus said that it would be precisely there, at the point of greatest darkness and chaos, that the bearers of the M would have to demonstrate their true spiritual strength. They would need to keep hope alive, not because they were naive about reality, but because they deeply understood that dark historical cycles always eventually give way to new light. I want to conclude this entire video with something specific that Nostradamus wrote in one of the last known texts before his death. He wrote it in classical Latin, and it was not correctly translated until the 20th century, when enough manuscripts had finally been gathered together. It stated, "Those marked by the M were not arbitrarily chosen by the gods or by blind destiny. They chose themselves before being born into this realm. They clearly saw what would come during this specific era and consciously decided to be here. Their physical mark is not a divine privilege. It is a constant reminder engraved into their own skin of the sacred commitment they made." I find that incredibly powerful and transformative, because it radically changes the entire narrative concerning what it means to possess this mark. You are not special because the universe capriciously selected you at random from among billions. You are special because, at the level of the soul and of your deepest being, you voluntarily decided to be here during this specific and extraordinarily difficult moment in human history, knowing that it would be chaotic, knowing that it would be painful, knowing that it would be confusing, but also knowing that your presence here, your sensitivity here, and your ability to serve as a bridge here would make a genuine difference. That is the true prophecy of Nostradamus concerning the letter M. Fundamentally, it is not about supernatural magical powers. It is about deeply reminding you who you are in your essence and why you are here, precisely at this moment. Therefore, if you can see the M on your hand, look at it right now, not as an entertaining mystical curiosity, but as a spiritual tattoo that reminds you each day of your greater purpose. If you do not physically possess the mark, that does not mean in any way that you are unimportant or do not have a crucial role. It simply means that your particular path is different. Every one of us is here for a specific reason. The true question is not whether you physically possess the mark. The profound question is this: what are you going to do consciously with the limited time you have on this planet? Are you going to live asleep and operate on autopilot, or are you going to awaken completely? Are you going to systematically ignore your intuition, or are you going to learn to trust it? Are you going to seek the easy and superficial path, or are you going to accept the challenge of living with genuine depth? That fundamental decision does not depend on the lines of your hand. It depends entirely on you. Take out the photograph that I asked you to capture at the beginning of this video. Look at it right now and honestly ask yourself, what are you going to do differently from this precise moment forward? This video was not created so that you could passively entertain yourself for 20 minutes. It was created specifically to awaken you.